You've got saved videos you'll never rewatch, podcast episodes you finished and immediately forgot, books with highlighted lines that never became part of your life. And if we're being honest, all of that can feel weirdly satisfying. It feels responsible. It feels ambitious. It feels like you're doing something with your life. But here's the question that matters. If all this learning is working, why hasn't much actually changed? Why do you still feel like you're circling the same problems with better vocabulary? That's the trap. The problem isn't just that you consume too much content. The problem is that modern content is extremely good at feeling useful, even when it leaves no mark on your behavior. So I want to show you the difference between taking in information and actually learning something well enough to use it. Because once you see that difference clearly, your whole relationship with content starts to change. Look at your own digital life for a second. How many tabs are open right now because you'll come back to them later? How many videos have you saved because they felt important? How many notes do you have that are really just storage closets for ideas you never touched again? Most people don't have an information problem. They have a loop problem. The loop keeps stopping too early. You watch something smart. It clicks. You feel sharper. Then the moment passes. And because the moment felt meaningful, your brain quietly files it under progress. But feeling clear for 30 seconds is not the same thing as being able to use the idea next Tuesday when you're tired, busy, and under pressure. That's the real distinction here. There is a huge gap between recognition and recall. Recognition is when an idea feels familiar. You hear it and think, yeah, that makes sense. You can follow it while it's right in front of you. Recall is different. Recall is when the video is gone, the notes are closed, nobody is helping you, and you can still bring the idea back in your own words and apply it to a real situation. And those two experiences feel much more similar than they should. That's why smart content is so deceptive. A well-made video can give you the emotional experience of understanding. The pacing is clean, the examples land, the story works. You nod along and think, I get it. And maybe you do get it in that moment. But momentary clarity is not the same as ownership. Here's a quick test. Think about the last video, article, or podcast episode that felt genuinely valuable. Not the last one you liked. The last one you thought might actually help you. Now explain it out loud without checking anything. Pretend a friend asked what it was about and why it mattered. Most people realize something uncomfortable right there. They remember the feeling of the content better than the content itself. They remember that it was good. They remember that it sounded true, but the structure is gone. The language gets fuzzy. The key point slips away. That's not because you're stupid, and it's not because you're lazy. It's because consuming and retrieving are different skills. The internet trains the first one constantly and almost never asks you to do the second. The feed is built to make the next piece easy to start, not to make the last piece easy to remember. That's a very different goal, and it gets expensive fast. Think about how much content you've consumed about productivity, deep work, time blocking, morning routines, second brains, dopamine detoxes, calendar systems, focus hacks. You've probably heard enough advice to rebuild your week 10 different ways. But how many of those ideas survived contact with your actual life? How many lasted longer than a burst of motivation and a cleaner-looking notes app? Or think about money. How many hours have people spent watching videos about freelancing, online business, personal branding, passive income, or side hustles? And after all that content, how many people have actually made one concrete offer, sent one useful email, or sold one real thing? That's the hidden cost. Not just wasted time, wasted certainty. You start to feel informed enough that action seems nearby, prepared enough that starting tomorrow feels reasonable, capable enough that one more video feels justified. So you keep feeding the feeling instead of testing the skill. And from the inside, that can look exactly like self-improvement. That's why this pattern is so sticky. It doesn't feel like procrastination, it feels like preparation. But being informed is not the same as being able. And being able is not the same as doing. Real learning usually feels worse than content consumption. That's part of the problem. Watching a strong video feels smooth. Learning rarely does. Real learning has friction. You try to explain the idea and notice the holes. You apply it to your own situation and realize you don't know where to begin. You attempt it once, do it badly, and have to correct yourself. That awkwardness is not a bug in the process. That is the process. People often think confusion means the lesson failed. Sometimes confusion is just the moment where passive familiarity stops and real understanding has to begin. Think about learning to drive. Nobody watched 2 clean tutorials, nodded thoughtfully, and became a driver. You had to get in the car. You had to misjudge distances, brake too hard, turn too late, feel stupid for a minute. And that discomfort wasn't evidence that learning wasn't happening. It was evidence that learning had finally become real. Most useful skills work like that. Writing, selling, speaking, coding, managing your time. They stop being abstract only when they meet resistance. So what do you do with that? You don't need a giant system. You don't need a prettier dashboard. You don't need 50 more saved resources on how to remember what you learn. You need a shorter loop. Here's a simple one. One idea, one explanation, one use. That's it. Take one idea from something you consume today. Explain it back in your own words from memory. Then, use it in real life within the next 24 hours. Not 10 ideas. Not a full summary. Not a polished document nobody will ever read again. One idea, one explanation, one use. Let's make it concrete. Say you watch a video about writing better email subject lines. The useful idea is that curiosity can outperform clarity when it's used well. Fine. Now close the tab and say the idea back plainly. A curiosity gap works because it leaves an open loop. The reader wants closure, so they're more likely to open. Good. Now use it. Write one actual subject line today that applies that idea. That tiny sequence matters more than finishing 5 more videos on copywriting, because now you've closed the loop. And once you close the loop, the content has to prove itself. It can't just sound smart. It has to survive contact with reality. That's the shift. The goal is not to consume less for the sake of consuming less. The goal is to stop mistaking exposure for growth. Some content really is useful. Some videos should change the way you think, but only if you force the idea to leave the screen and enter your life. Otherwise, it's just intellectual wallpaper. Nice to look at, easy to agree with, gone by tomorrow. So before you move on from this video, do one small thing. Pick one idea from it. Say it back without looking. Then use it somewhere real before the day ends. If you do that, this wasn't just another video you watched. It became practice.